Today, we uncover the 5 bread brands America should be warning about. Products that were pulled off shelves from metal fragments. Everyday loaves so artificial and engineered that calling them bread is starting to feel generous. For decades, the American public was told that a slice of toast was part of a healthy breakfast, that piling our plates with carbs and cutting back on red meat was somehow good for us. They convinced us that the traditional bacon, eggs, and sausage was the enemy, while quietly steering us toward the one thing they could mass-produce cheaply and sell to us every single morning. Fast forward to today, and heart disease hasn't gone down, it's gone up. Obesity hasn't fallen, it's exploded. And the very foods they demonized, real meals with real ingredients, were never the problem. Instead, they replaced them with Frankenstein foods, products so heavily altered, stabilized, softened, and chemically engineered that the ingredient list reads more like a lab manual than a breakfast. The media pushed it, doctors repeated it, and for decades, we believed them. Because bread used to be simple: flour, water, yeast, and a pinch of salt. But the bread on supermarket shelves today has quietly become one of the most ultra-processed items in your entire shopping cart, packed with preservatives, emulsifiers, and additives so strong that no traditional baker would ever call them bread.
Number 1. Nature's Own Honey Wheat. The loaf that pretends to be the healthy choice, when really it's just processed deception wrapped in earth-tone packaging. A product marketed to American families as the responsible option, the wholesome alternative, the bread you buy when you want to feel like you're doing something good for your kids. But peel back the branding, and the truth is far less wholesome. They've wrapped this loaf in phrases like no artificial preservatives, no high-fructose corn syrup, and healthy choice, all while knowing full well that the actual formulation is built on the same foundation as the cheapest white bread. Refined flour, refined carbs, soybean oil, ingredients the body was never designed to metabolize. Nature's Own is the perfect example of the deception we've all been living under. It looks healthy, it sounds healthy, it's advertised as healthy, but in reality, it's an ultra-processed imposter dressed up in wholesome colors and friendly slogans designed to win your trust, not support your health. And here's the part they don't want you to remember. Bread wasn't always like this. There was a time, and not even that long ago, when bread was actually bread. 5 ingredients long: flour, water, salt, yeast, and maybe a touch of fat. Nothing your great-grandparents wouldn't recognize, nothing your body would fight against. Contrast that with today's version, a long list of lab-made additives, dough conditioners, soybean oil, mono and diglycerides, calcium propionate, datum, and synthetic vitamins. A formula designed not for nourishment, but for softness, speed, and shelf life. And yet, for years, they told us this was healthy. When the brand has been in your pantry since childhood, it's easy to assume it's safe. But this is the great deception of the modern American food system. Even the most trusted labels no longer guarantee purity, quality, or honesty. This isn't the bread your grandparents bought at the local bakery. This isn't the bread your family once relied on. This is a new creation, industrial bread. Designed in factories, stretched with chemicals, stabilized with additives, and pumped full of cheap seed oils because they're inexpensive for corporations, not because they're good for you. Number 2. Great value white bread. The budget loaf millions of American households throw into their cart without a second thought. The one people buy because it's cheap, familiar, and always in stock at Walmart. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Walmart's great value white sliced loaf has become one of the quietest contributors to poor health in this country, not because it's dramatic or shocking, but because it's ordinary, because it slips under the radar, because people assume that something so simple, something so plain, something so everyday couldn't possibly be harmful. But take one look at the nutritional panel and the ingredient list, and suddenly it becomes painfully clear why this loaf is a problem. High salt, low fiber, sugar, cheap refined flour, a carb load so concentrated it spikes your blood sugar like a dessert. And then, of course, the usual suspects: emulsifiers, preservatives, texture modifiers, all the things no real baker would ever add to bread. All the things that keep this loaf soft far longer than any natural product should ever stay soft. This isn't food made for nourishment, it's food made for mass production, long-distance distribution, and maximum profit with minimum cost. Walmart markets it as a simple staple, a no-frills essential, just bread, but there's nothing simple about it. This loaf is the direct result of industrialization, a product designed to survive warehouses, trucks, shelves, and pantries without changing shape, smell, or texture for extremely long periods. So what do you expect it will do in your stomach? Emulsifiers like mono and diglycerides to keep the crumbs soft, soybean oil to extend shelf life and create that artificially smooth texture people have been conditioned to crave. And that's part of the trick, the conditioning. Over time, the public has been trained to believe that real bread should feel like this: light, fluffy, springy, perfectly shaped, identical slice after slice after slice. But this isn't how bread behaves. Real bread goes stale. Real bread breaks. Real bread has texture. Real bread has life. Real bread doesn't sit in a plastic bag for a week without changing. The only reason great value white bread does is because it's held together with additives and stabilizers that didn't exist in the bakeries of old America. Great value is the perfect example of modern food deception, a product that pretends to be simple while being engineered with unnatural ingredients your body was never designed to handle every day. It's not just cheap, it's a cheap imitation of what bread is supposed to be.
Number 3. Wonder Bread Classic White. The most iconic loaf in American history. The bread that builds strong bodies 12 ways. The childhood staple that practically defined American sandwiches for generations. And today, it's one of the most ultra-processed products you can buy. Wonder Bread is American nostalgia in a bag. The polka dots, the soft texture, the promise of wholesome nutrition. For over a century, this brand has been a fixture in American homes, school lunches, and family dinners. But look at the ingredient list and tell me what part of this resembles anything a real baker would create. Enriched flour, stripped of nutrition then synthetically fortified. High fructose corn syrup, soybean oil, calcium propionate, sodium stearoyl lactylate, monoglycerides, ethoxylated mono and diglycerides, azodicarbonamide, a dough conditioner also used in yoga mats and shoe soles. This loaf wasn't made for nourishment, it was engineered for endurance, shelf stability, and that impossibly soft texture Americans have been trained to expect. Wonder Bread is the clearest example of how far we've fallen. A brand built on heritage and trust, now selling a formula that barely resembles food. Industrial bread wearing a nostalgic costume. And they know that if the packaging stays familiar enough, if the price stays low enough, people won't stop to think about the hidden cost to their long-term health. Because it's always the same story. High sodium, barely any fiber, refined carbs that spike your blood sugar, multiple emulsifiers that disrupt your gut, and zero nutritional depth. Yet millions of people eat this every day, believing it's a harmless staple, when in reality it's one of the quietest contributors to rising heart disease, weight gain, and metabolic issues across the country. Wonder Bread built its name on feeding America, then quietly abandoned everything that name stood for. Number 4. Sara Lee Delightful White. A brand built on heritage, quality, and the promise of nobody doesn't like Sara Lee. Selling a loaf that has quietly abandoned every single part of that legacy. Sara Lee is one of the most recognizable names in American food. The emotional branding about family, tradition, and American pride. They've spent decades carefully shaping an image of authenticity and quality. But Sara Lee Delightful isn't a traditional loaf, not anymore. It's an ultra-processed formula built on preservatives, emulsifiers, refined flour, soybean oil, and dough conditioners. An industrial creation wearing the costume of an American classic. And this raises the question nobody asks. Why on earth do we need bread packed with seed oils? Bread is one of humanity's oldest foods. Flour, water, yeast, and salt. That's it. For thousands of years, those 4 ingredients were enough to feed entire civilizations. Yet today, in the modern American supermarket, even something as innocent as a plain white loaf is loaded with soybean oil, canola oil, and chemical improvers designed to keep the product soft. We already have to deal with snacks flooded with seed oils, packaged foods drenched in seed oils, fast food cooked in seed oils, ultra-processed junk food built entirely on seed oils, and now even our bread. The one thing that should have remained simple has become yet another delivery system for cheap industrial oils our bodies were never meant to handle daily. Sara Lee built its name on heritage, then quietly abandoned everything that heritage stood for. Their bread used to be a proper American loaf, made with care. You could smell it, you could feel it. It went stale after a day or two because it was alive, because it was real food. Fast forward to Sara Lee Delightful today, and you're looking at a product engineered to stay soft for days, sometimes over a week, no matter how many additives it takes to maintain that unnatural texture. Number 5. Sara Lee Earthgrains 100% Natural Wheat Berry, the metal fragment scandal. The one that proves this entire industry isn't just unhealthy, it can be outright dangerous. And what makes this one so shocking is that it wasn't some niche product sitting in the back of a specialty store. This was a school lunchbox staple, a family favorite, a healthier option millions of parents chose because they thought whole wheat was somehow better than white bread. But in 2007, Sara Lee had to recall multiple bread products, including Earthgrains and Sara Lee Delightful varieties, after a routine inspection revealed a damaged whole wheat flour sifter. Metal fragments may have contaminated the baked goods during the production process. Not just one batch, multiple products distributed across Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Missouri, Georgia, Tennessee, Louisiana, and Florida. Just think about that for a moment. Families buying these loaves for their children, parents making packed lunches before school, people choosing whole wheat instead of white bread because they think it's cleaner, healthier, safer. And all that time, metal fragments may have been inside the product, sharp, invisible, sitting inside food people eat quickly without a second thought. And it's not just Sara Lee. In 2024, bread recalls for metal contamination hit Signature Select in California and Nevada. In 2016, Coffee Cup Bakery recalled nearly 90,000 products for plastic contamination. Upper Crust Bakery recalled rolls for glass fragments. This keeps happening over and over because the system is broken. The FDA issues warnings, products get pulled, and then everyone moves on until the next recall.
Bonus number 6. Pepperidge Farm Farmhouse White. Before we wrap this up, this one deserves special mention. It's not just another loaf. It's almost a statement of how far we've fallen. Pepperidge Farm built its reputation on quality, on baking traditions, on the promise that their bread was different, better, more authentic than the competition. But look at the ingredient list for Farmhouse White and ask yourself, would a human being with basic common sense recognize these as food? Enriched flour, high fructose corn syrup, soybean oil, calcium propionate, mono and diglycerides, datum, sodium steer oil lactylate. Is this what bread has come to today? Chemicals, seed oils, stabilizers, texturizers, none of which exist in real traditional bread. This is what they are trying to get us to eat. And if the ingredients weren't enough to raise alarm, check the reviews online. Many customers report that the bread tastes bland, plasticky, stale, even when eaten immediately after purchase. Some have even said that birds in their yard refuse to eat it. Now that's got to tell you something. They're trying to push food to the public that even the street pigeons reject with their higher standards. If even the birds won't touch it, maybe it's time we asked what we're putting into our bodies and what we're handing to the next generation. This bread sums up the whole problem. Cheap cost, massive volume, minimal real nutrient value, and maximum chemical engineering, all wrapped up in a comforting, familiar package. And because it's at the affordable end, the promise is you're saving money, but the trade-off is your health, your gut, your digestion, and what counts as food in your home. The uncomfortable truth. As these corporations become more profit-driven and more disconnected from real food than ever before, this situation isn't going to magically improve. If anything, it's only going to get worse. Every year, the ingredient lists get longer.
Every year, more shortcuts get taken. Every year, the food they deliver becomes more artificial. Not because it makes the food better, not because it nourishes families, but because it boosts margins, speeds up production, extends shelf life, and keeps these companies competitive in a race to the bottom. And we are the ones paying the price, with our health, with our trust, and with the slow erosion of food culture itself. What do we do about it? You don't need to go fully homemade or overhaul your entire diet overnight. Even the smallest step makes a difference. If you can, try baking just one loaf of bread at home each week. Even if it's not all the bread your family eats, even if it's just a Sunday loaf or a weekend bake, it's a skill worth rediscovering. It's simple, cheap, grounding, and honest. And more than that, it's a skill that can be passed down to the next generation. A legacy of real food in a world where everything is becoming artificial. Imagine a future where your children know how to make bread from scratch instead of relying on whatever Frankenstein formulas the supermarkets decide to push next. That alone is worth the effort. And even if you don't have time for homemade bread or a full traditional American breakfast every morning, that's fine. Life is busy, but there are still better choices. Instead of grabbing an ultra-processed square of industrial bread, try something with fewer ingredients. Stick to whole foods when you can. Swap out the artificial loaf for real oatmeal. Traditional steel-cut oats cooked in 5 minutes. Nourishing, filling, and completely unprocessed. A bowl of oats is infinitely better for you than a slice of bread held together with conditioners and industrial oils. And you don't need to be perfect. You just need to make better choices more often than not. Because the American public deserves real food and honesty. Instead, we've been sold illusions. They kept the name bread, but not the product. What we have today is not the bread of our grandparents' era. It's not the bread America was built on. What we have now is something entirely different, something engineered, manipulated, restructured, softened, preserved, stretched, bleached, and oiled. Something so far removed from real food that calling it bread feels like a technicality. It's Frankenstein food. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's why we need to pull back the curtain, to show you what's really happening, to remind you that you still have a choice. Because the moment we stop accepting these imitations, the moment we return to real ingredients, real food, real skills, that's the moment the industry is forced to change. Until then, stay aware, stay sharp, and protect your plate.